Since video games are one of the most interactive ways to immerse you into a story, having a villain makes that experience so much more enjoyable, because while you go around fighting villains and exploring new areas, you find that the villain has a lot to offer and provides a lot in the story. In other words, this villain just makes the game work. But there are some villains who just fail in every conceivable way and tend to bog down the story. So this list is going to go down and tear down some of the worst of the worst. This is the top 10 worst villains.
Want to join them? I hear the acids now.
This might be the most obvious entry on my list. If you've ever played Kirby or know anything about this villain, you should know why he's on this list. I've heard quite a few YouTubers talk about this guy as if he's the worst villain to ever be created in a video game and how he ultimately fails as a villain. As a response, I say, it's Kirby. Since he's a villain from a very mellow child's game, he saved himself from being any higher on this list. I'm sure all the other candidates would kick his ass anyways. However, that's also the biggest problem. King Dedede is just a whiny, portly, bratty mess of a man. Or a penguin. What usually makes a villain so great is their cunning mind and their ability to make a plan and execute it with ease. They're not only strong, but they know how to get things done. King Dedede is none of the above. His villainous status is mostly driven on greed, gluttony, and oppression, stealing things simply because he doesn't want someone else to have them, eating everything in sight, and letting it be known that he is the boss and he has authority. Sounds to me like he's just a giant baby who doesn't want to share. But seriously, if a villain isn't all too smart, then he's not really much of a villain in my eyes. Sure, he's still an antagonist, but he's an awful one at that. But like I said, he was specifically designed that way. The designers and the players already know that making King Dedede a pathetic, whining, bratty king was the plan from the get-go. For the rest of these characters, they tend to tip the scale a bit, even if they wouldn't be able to lift King Dedede on an actual scale.
Want to join them? I hear the acids now.
We have a guy whose superiority complex seems to reach high levels, somewhat so that defeat is practically non-existent in the mind of Getsis, leader of Team Plasma. Getsis is just so bland, it's very annoying. I would have liked Team Plasma if they were actually trying to liberate Pokemon for the right reasons, which is probably why I like N. When I first saw Getsis' design, I thought he would be some kind of badass with something new to offer Pokemon. With all the team bosses in the Pokemon games, they look like businessmen and overall symbolize mafia crime bosses and money snatchers. Getsis looked like he would be some kind of chronokinetic priest, which would have been awesome. Although we finally see what he wants out of life, to ensure that the Unova region would be his to rule. He stole everyone's Pokemon. Gee, if you wanted to take over the world, you could have just put the whole world to sleep with your goddamn monologues. I have no real issue with monologues unless they're interesting and tend to tie into an interesting part of the lore that is present in the story. You know, something engaging. Getsis is just so bland at the core that you'll likely forget everything he says when you beat the game. Even when you defeat him, he gives you the most cliche defeat line ever. Cool story, bro. Maybe you can write some more about it in jail. Just no monologues. You've lost that privilege.
Want to join them? I hear the acids now.
I guess the only good thing that's going for the Sorceress and Spyro You're the Dragon is the fact that her plan was not too bad. By stealing all the dragon's eggs, it gives Spyro enough of a reason to go on this big quest. Sure, it wasn't quite like the original Spyro, where Nasty Nork encased all the dragons in stone, but it was still interesting to go collect the eggs and see what babies came out. But even so, the Sorceress was not too innovative as a villain. With any sorcerer's vast understanding of magic and her title as queen, you'd think she'd be smart enough to plan ahead and find new ways to stop Spyro and his friends from collecting more eggs and reaching her lair. But nope, spam the fuck out of the Rhinox in every level and hope they're strong enough to stop Spyro. She even takes advantage of her minions in all the wrong ways, verbally abusing Bianca and making her feel like shit and just being a poor excuse of a leader. What also puts the Sorceress on this list is that she is the direct cause for you giving up all your money. Moneybags keeps all of your unlockable companions by her order, and you have to pay to let them out. Fucking Sorceress is the cause for my distinct hatred for Moneybags. But he's not on this list because he's not much of a villain, since you can pretty much buy your way out of his inconvenient setbacks, and almost everything he does is because of the Sorceress. Goddamn Sorceress. Not only did she take my children, but she's really good at being a thief.
Want to join them? I hear the acids love.
Good God, this game was awful. And I'm not just talking about the graphics and gameplay. The story was just simplistic and very laughable at times. Sonic 2006 can pretty much be summed up as a pile of shit. And the same can be said about the voice acting. But even so, the series did create a somewhat decent looking villain, but even a badass appearance won't compensate for the poor excuse of story development. Mephiles the Dark was just a sad representation of a cunning mind. That is how he's described. Since Solaris was split into two beings, the two beings took on different identities. Iblis being the immense power of Solaris, and then Mephiles, the cunning mind. Sure, Mephiles had his moments, but all of this is just squandered when you look into his motives deeply. He wants to reunite with Iblis and have Sonic out of the picture so that he can just destroy everything. So what was the point of him messing around with Shadow, other than to get the Chaos Emeralds before Sonic and Shadow could get to them? Other than those instances, Mephiles spends his time executing his master plan and then detours so he can just antagonize Shadow. Yeah, it was Shadow who sealed Mephiles in the first place, so it could be to exact revenge. However, this was more of an excuse to tie Mephiles into Shadow's story, just showing up as his personal rival rather than a threat to the world. Give a speech here, send Shadow forwards in time there, try to manipulate Shadow here, and then just fuck around with him some more. The actions Mephiles takes to fuck with the other characters is clever, and it really shows how great of a villain he could have been, but he falls apart in randomized segments. Although, his saving grace is that he's voiced by Dan Green, and that gives him badass points, since Dan Green's performance is likely the only good excuse for voice acting in this game.
But there's still time for you to change your mind. Join me, Shadow. Let us teach this world a lesson.
Want to join them? I hear the acids love.
Before I tackle these guys, I'll just let you all know something. Silent Hill is one of my favorite franchises of all time. Though once the Silent Hill movie came out a while ago, the newer games seem to be incorporating monsters from the second game and the movie into these new games, with the exception of Downpour and Shattered Memories. While Origins mostly used the nurses and straitjackets, Silent Hill Homecoming was very adamant on putting cultist gas mask soldiers and Pyramid Head into this game, for whatever reason. Pyramid Head had no reason to be in this game other than fan service. It's not what Pyramid Head represents. With that being said, Pyramid Head isn't going to be on this list. Like I said, the cultists are just a pain to see in this game. Here's a clip from a YouTuber named Cybercat who could put it in more detail than I ever could.
I am not a fan of cult members being enemies. Maybe that sounds odd from someone who liked Silent Hill 4, but Walter was no longer human by this point. You're basically fighting a projection of him, and he's all supernatural and all that jazz. You shouldn't ever have to kill regular living, breathing people in a Silent Hill game. The only exception should be James killing Eddie because it was symbolic.
I killed a human being.
And of course if the people look like monsters.
Oh no. Don't worry. It's just a joke.
You're supposed to fight monsters. Silent Hill is supposed to be how the town itself throws things in your way. Involving other people too much kind of takes away from the idea that the town is what's really in control. And again, I guess Silent Hill 4 kind of messed with that idea a little bit, but Silent Hill 4 was about someone using the power from the town and bringing it elsewhere. It didn't involve hordes of humans attacking the protagonist.
Want to join them? I hear the acids love.
Ultimate Ninja 4 was definitely nowhere near close to being the best of the many Naruto video games. Unlike the Ninja Storm series, you can only play a small selection of the Shippuden's first story arc, like half of the Kazekage arc. So other than playing in hero mode and doing side missions for a longer gaming experience, this game would have been very short. So just like the anime, they decided to add a filler arc. At the beginning of the game, you're training with Jiraiya, and you enter a village that's under the influence of a demon named Black Shadow. Even if the game doesn't directly say it's a tailed beast, it's a tailed beast. Fillers tag along unneeded stories, and even in the movies they cause this problem. The first Shippuden movie created their own tailed beast. Even in this game, the demon was just an excuse to add a totally interesting demon to the series to make it look cooler. Black Shadow just ends up being a terrible tag-along character to a filler that was just thrown in to make this game longer than it would have been. He may look cool, but he's just a mess of shit thrown together with a very uninteresting name. With some of the work put into the filler, Black Shadow could have been a decent addition to the game. All in all, the tree-felling village arc was just a tag-along, and Black Shadow was, well, just a tag-along. You know that's a terrible villain when you see it, when it's just tacked onto the game to compensate for how short it is.
Want to join them? I hear the acids lovely.
As much as I enjoyed Prototype's gameplay, the story wasn't all too engaging. If anything, the story had a very few grasping moments and some very unappealing moments, which is made worse when Elizabeth Green is introduced as an antagonist. Okay, Elizabeth was the cause for almost everything that happens in the story itself, starting the outbreak in Hope, Idaho, and creating hunters who become a major inconvenience if you aren't too big on buying lots of combat upgrades. She created a lot of other types of infected beings into the series, which more or less serve as bosses, so she serves to be a very helpful asset to the New York outbreak and a tough villain to face, but she comes off as a cliche, Oracle-like villain with a creepy voice and unusual movement pattern. Her attempts at being scary and horrific just make me laugh, to be honest. Elizabeth has this tendency to behave like a possessed child from a horror movie, or just completely random, puking on the ground to create a boss and scuttle away like a creepy little crab girl, or speaking like multiple ghosts just possessed her body while giving vague responses to Alex Mercer's questions.
I am your mother.
And even saying some random shit that only makes sense if you were paying attention well enough to get her references, or and the entire story if you look it up online. So I ask, why? Elizabeth Green is just random and creepy for the sake of being random and creepy. Sure, she created a lot of bosses, and she's been in prison for a good chunk of her life, but she doesn't behave like she's mentally insane. She behaves like this because the game wants you to know that this girl caused the outbreak and she's an inconvenience. They tried too hard to make you fear her, but in the end, she's just laughably unintimidating. The boss fight with her was also annoying. I could go deeper on that fight in another video. In the end, if a villain isn't intimidating, they don't really seem like they're much of a challenge.
Want to join them? I hear the acids lovely.
I never would have imagined that a game like Brutal Legend could immerse me in such a world. This game is literally a mythical fantasy world run by the power of metal. It's so cheesy that it caused me to become invested in this world and what it had to offer. The story was pretty interesting, and I wanted to learn more about the characters that were introduced. Even the villains were pretty interesting, like General Limelight and Diviculus. So with all the villains this game had to offer, why did Drowned Ophelia have to be as awful as she was?
Hey, look, Eddie. I finally got myself a car. It's got a special seat in the back, just for you.
I can't say that I was very interested in Ophelia when she was introduced. I was more into Lars and some of the other characters you come across, but that didn't make her useless. She was helpful here and there, and she obviously was a love interest when you got a little deeper into the game, but then Brutal Legend took a huge turn after Lars died, and Ophelia was abandoned. Let's go drown in the sea of black tears and be awesome, right? Holy shit, Drowned Ophelia's annoying. Like, she tries way too hard to be this edgy, heartless character that doesn't care about anything. Each line of dialogue is just a chore to listen to. Her tone of voice and the lines of dialogue she was given turn Ophelia into that annoying teenage girl in your math class that hates everything and wants everyone to know how much she hates everyone and everything. Her army is excruciatingly tough to fight, which is probably the only good thing about Drowned Ophelia. Hell, they even look more original than what she turned into. But that's not all. When Ophelia was left behind by Eddie, she spent an entire 3 months on her own before she decided to jump into the sea of black tears. Why didn't she spend all that time trying to find ways to prove that she wasn't a traitor? Or she could have just built an army to aid Eddie. She could have been smart and just, well, be smart. She's the shining example of someone trying way too hard to be edgy, cynical, and heartless.
Want to join them? I hear the acids now.
Holy shit, the Panther King from Conker's Bad Fur Day has to be one of the stupidest main villains I have ever seen in a video game. It's excruciatingly mind-numbing. It's just sadly hilarious. A Panther King that is so evil that he must have a red squirrel as a table leg for his royal table so that he can successfully drink milk like a high king once again. Good God, this is the stupidest thing that I could ever encounter in a video game. But holy shit, do I love the Panther King for being this stupid. Yeah, the Panther King takes this spot for being one of the stupidest villains I've ever seen in a game. But I didn't say I had to hate all the entries on this list. I'm actually glad something like this exists, especially in Conker's Bad Fur Day. Oh my god, this game loves to be random and simple, and it's just amazing. The levels and all the characters are just strange, and like I said, the main villain is just so incredibly stupid. The Panther King is addicted to drinking milk, and once he needs a new table leg, he has his scientists solve this major problem. Then they come to the conclusion that a red squirrel is a good substitute. Hey, Conker's a red squirrel. Ha! This game is going to be amazingly stupid. That's essentially everything you'll probably think when you first start this game. And the Panther King is one of the main reasons for this. I can't get enough of how stupid this villain is, but in a game like this, it saves itself from being number one. However, number one is stupid in all of the wrong ways. In a way that makes the Panther King seem like he's actually a threat.
Want to join them? I hear the acids now.
A revenge theme for video games can go in many different directions. Sometimes it works out well. Characters will get revenge on the villain, or the villain will get revenge on the protagonist. So, what could possibly take revenge and fuck it up completely? Ride to Hell is such a shitty game, yeah, but the whole game revolves around getting revenge on a rival biker gang that kills your brother and eventually kills your uncle. So you kill hordes upon hordes of bikers, until you eventually find the leader of the Devil's Hand biker gang, Caesar.
Little orphan Jakey.
Caesar was modeled to be this crazy biker, an insane, cruel, evil guy that's out to get Jake's family. I guess he was also a really bad father, but we don't care about that to begin with. But that's it. That's the problem. When even the main character of your fucking game isn't threatened by anything, you're likely not going to be intimidated yourself. If you don't have very many characters in the game to relate with, the emotional bond you have for the game and its characters is non-existent. Which is where Caesar fails on that aspect. Also, what the hell is up with this?
Ellie, look at me. How many of them?
An army. They're everywhere. This is the end, Jake.
An army? How does he have an army? We've already killed hundreds of Devil's Hand bikers to begin with. You're in the middle of the desert with one town that has a population of at least 400 people. How did you manage to replace an unrealistic amount of bikers you've already killed with a ridiculously unrealistic amount of bikers? Where are you getting these people from? Is there a town that they're holed up in? Do all these people just show up as agents when they're called for backup? Where were they in the first place? So many questions left unanswered. This game was supposed to be modeled as a realistic biker experience. But back to the revenge subject. This entire game is supposed to be modeled after revenge. Lots of characters in Ride to Hell are trying to get revenge on someone for something for some reason. And all of it goes nowhere. Nowhere. Because the events of the game happen poorly. That it just went into nowhere land. And Caesar is the main cause for Jake's little journey to get revenge. Because Caesar wants revenge. Do you know why Caesar is out to kill Jake's family? Do you know why he wants to kill Jake and his family to begin with? What possible reason could he have to get revenge on Jake? Because he didn't like Jake's dad. I mean, there are a few reasons. Jake's dad did give him a nice cut on his face, but everything Jake's father did amounted to nothing as a final result. Caesar wanted to kill people because it was fun, and Jake's dad didn't really like that all too much. So he murdered Jake's mom and dad. Then he decided to kill the rest of their family years later. Why? Why did you wait 20 years to kill Jake's uncle and his brother? And then Jake? You didn't even kill Jake. Jake killed you. But why did you wait so long to act upon doing it? You have no problem with killing people, and you've already said that, so why wouldn't you have done it when Jake and Mikey were children, or even as babies? The story was just so all over the place. If you want a game that does revenge well, play Silent Hill Downpour. Nothing was put together in an orderly fashion in Ride to Hell Retribution, either because the game was just changed from an open-world biker game to what it is now, or they thought that the game's story made enough sense in their perspective to release it. Everything in this game happens because of Jake and Caesar, and when the protagonist's actions are just as mind-numbingly stupid as the antagonists, then you're in for a fucking shitty game. And that is why Caesar is the worst villain I have seen in a video game. By far.